Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Elena. I'm Elena. In this show, we celebrate moments of divine awareness and where these moments take you in your journey of growth. Join us for conversations exploring people, their aha moments, and the lives they have created. This episode is sponsored by Spaces Quarterly, a modern living guide. Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to Conversations with Elena. And today I have a very special guest. Her name is Morrissey, and I want to tell you a little bit about her. She is a transformational speaker, coach, executive coach, and corporate consultant. Mary has over 30 years experience in empowering individuals in abundance, authenticity, and success. She really is an awesome person. And she is a sought-after expert on the invisible side of success. She has spoken many times at the United Nations, and the best part, she has worked with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, and Nelson Mandela. Also, her book, her best-selling book, Building Your Field of Dreams, was made into a PBS special. Okay, and then, among all these other achievements that she has, her highest degrees that she thinks are the most important, that she loves and are her favorite, are her 2 black belts. She has one in success and the other in failure. And I just love that. Now, she has sent us a quote by Thoreau, who I love. I'd like to read this. I have learned this, at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of their dream, endeavoring to live the life they are imagining, one passes an invisible boundary. All sorts of things begin to occur that never otherwise would have occurred. One begins to meet with success unexpected in common hours. New, more universal, more liberal laws begin to establish themselves around this person, or the old laws are rearranged in one's favor. Nevertheless, one begins to live with a license of higher order of beings. Awesome. And with that, I would like to welcome Mary to our show. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Elena. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. So what I usually do, and I'd like to keep that format going, I'd like to know why you chose that quote and how it has meaning in your life.
You know, I love your work. You can't escape a prison you don't know you're in.
Thank you.
Until you know you're in one and what it is.
Yeah.
I was in a prison in my own life, in my early life, until I was about 22 years old. I didn't even know it was, as you write about it, as you're the expert in helping people recognize that we have self-imposed boundaries that we're not even aware of based on our own thinking.
Yes.
And I went to a lecture and I heard a man speak, and he said some things that I totally disagreed with, but I did do the thing he invited me to do, and my life completely changed. And I went through a doorway where I had felt like I'd been living, I didn't know to call it a prison, Elena. I felt, the way I described it is, I've been living in a little dark attic of myself.
Oh.
And through this practice, I have now found my way to the front door, opened it wide, and there is a technicolor world that I have found that I have the possibility and now the ability to live in and from. So right after that, I ran into the Thoreau work. And when I saw his work in 1971, as I began to study transformation, I knew, and I think pretty much everybody who ever hears Thoreau's quote knows that it's a really good quote.
Yes.
I put that in my first book, Building Your Field of Dreams, on page 21. Uh-huh. And I left a little piece of it, because there's a piece of it, new, more universal, more liberal laws begin to establish themselves. The old laws are rearranged in one's favor. I left that part out, and as an author, you can put ... when you leave a portion out of a quote. And it would be until 2007. So from 1995, when I wrote the book, until 2007, I knew that was a great quote, but I didn't know it was a code. In 2007, I went to uh, Concord, Massachusetts, toured the Emerson House, went to Walden Lake, and really researched how Henry David Thoreau, how those who gathered, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, others who gathered and studied this thing, where it was a different way of thinking. And what you're bringing people is a liberating thinking, a way of applying the potential that we all have to bring transformation to our lives. And I recognized that what he had said there, if applied in the sequence in which he described it, it was a liberating path for individuals to pull from their potential and bring forth their dreams.
Yes.
So that quote has been very important, not only to me, but my work. But I think the quote that, while it's not my favorite quote, the one that helped me, it would be a doorway, I think, to any one of your listeners,
Yes.
Is this quote. In 1971, when I went to that lecture, and I'm 22 years old, and I'm, as most of us at 22, I'm pretty much full of thinking I know how it all works.
Of course.
And I'm sitting in this lecture, and the lecturer said, at some point in his lecture, he said, so here's the truth. Nothing is bad unless you think it's bad. And I know I either literally or certainly energetically crossed my arms, leaned back, and said, this is not true. I mean, there is bad stuff in this world. Car wrecks are bad, murder is bad, war is bad. Come on, there's bad stuff in this world. And then he said, I know what you're thinking, and I will agree with you at the level of fact. There are things that not one of us want to have happen in the world or in our life. However, what I am speaking to is your power and your capacity to, no matter what happens in your life, find a way to turn that experience, that condition, into something that actually accelerates your life and produces good in your life. So let me give you a tool. The next time something happens in your life that you immediately think, oh my God, this is bad, hit your internal pause button, wait 3 days, but don't just wait 3 days. During those 3 days, turn up the volume on your curiosity about what possible good there could be in that experience, and cause yourself to write down any possible good there could be in that experience. If after 3 days you can't find any good, you really can't find any good, excuse me,
Okay.
you can't find any good. He said, if after 3 days you can't find any good, you can still get really upset about it. Go ahead and just get really upset about it. But do the process first.
Yes.
So I left that and thought, well, that was interesting. I left. My husband and I left. We went home. 2 days later, my husband came home looking ashen. And I said, what happened? And he said, they did a massive layoff at work today. 100 of us got laid off. And I immediately started to go into panic. It's like, oh my gosh, we've got 2 little kids and we've got, bills to pay. And I started getting all panicky over it. And then I said, oh my gosh, that guy said, nothing is bad unless we think it's bad. This just seems so bad.
Right.
So what did he say to do? Hit your internal pause button. Where is that? How do I find that? Wait 3 days, and then what was it? Dial up our curiosity on what possible good. And so I said, okay, it's 5 o'clock Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If by 5 o'clock on Friday we can't find some good in this, then we'll panic. And we both kind of laughed, but it was the first time, Elena, I ever had the experience of being able to have a condition without the condition having me.
Yes.
And during that 3 days, did panic want to rise up in me over and over again? Yes, it did. But I simply now had a tool could move it and say Friday at 5. I'll talk to you Friday at 5. And actually, my children's father was better at generating ideas about what possible good. He drove an hour and a half each way to work. He said, what if I had a job closer to home? We wrote that down. That'd be good. I mean, what if I made a little more money? Well, that'd be good. What if, and we came up with 5 or 6 possible goods.
Yes.
And what I didn't know about the technology of the thinking that you bring people is that when you are thinking from the problem channel, all you can think are thoughts about the problem. And when you move to the possibility channel, possibilities talk to you, and ideas of a different order come to you.
Exactly.
And places he could apply closer to home that might pay more money all began to occur to us. By Thursday afternoon, he came home. Now, this is Tuesday at 5. He's lost a job that he's had for 4 years. By Thursday, in the afternoon, he comes home all bright-eyed and shiny, and he goes, "Guess what?" I said, "Well, I don't know, but it's good news, I can tell." And he had gotten a job closer to home, way shorter hours, particularly take 3 hours off the drive, shorter hours, more money. He could ride his bike to work, which he loved doing.
Wow.
And I hadn't suffered in the same way I had always throughout my entire life suffered, waiting for a condition to change before I could feel better. Now that was
Yes.
prison. That was a prison
That is a
that
prison.
I had been trained to live by, that I
Most
didn't
people.
even know I was in. And now I found a key to open a door that opened the door to my living a different
And
life.
it is the most liberating feeling when you can erase all that worry, doubt, fear, panic, and learn how to deal with it. Yeah, it's
Yeah, if you
wonderful.
can't erase it all, at least you can sequester it.
Right,
You
true,
can make an
true.
appointment with it and have it take a little tiny corner and not the whole, it doesn't get to crawl in bed with you at night. It doesn't get to come to your dinner table. It doesn't get
Right.
to, into all over your whole life.
Right, and I love that method because people feel like, okay, but if nothing happens, I can do that panic thing, and it puts it off on a shelf. But meanwhile, you get to think. Yeah, that's a wonderful method. I just adore that. Well, and I love the quote too. Now, could you tell us a little bit about the door that opened you into creating the life that, well, you love your life. I know you love your life. You have done magnificent things. You've helped so many people. You've brought so much good to the world. I mean, what opened you to this life? From, you mentioned that you had been in a prison and things like that,
Well,
but
that was a step one. Then when I said that was one of the keys, that was just that the that particular experience helped me touch the part of myself that every one of us has that is
right,
transcendent
okay,
or more than our conditions.
right,
So
right,
when so through your work, what you do is help people get to know and then live their life and think their thoughts from the part of them that is more than the conditions they're
exactly,
facing. Because we've all been trained in a particular model of living our life,
mm-hmm.
which I call condition based living. So if we want to
Yes,
do something, we look to our conditions for permission. Do I have the money? Do I have the
yes,
time? Do I know somebody who can help me? My conditions give me permission or not to live a life I love living. We
exactly,
all got trained in that. By the time we were 5 years old, we could name our five senses. We got very directed to look to our external environment for permission and approval,
exactly,
and lost touch with the part of us that is more than the world of conditions. So
exactly.
and here's the truth, about 97% of all humans on our planet will live and die without ever knowing what it is that you bring people.
I know,
And it's a very sad. So
I
your
know.
podcast and your
Well,
work,
thank you.
I want to encourage everyone who is listening to this to go deeper. Listen to Elena's podcast. You'll learn something. You'll have a takeaway tool you can use in every single interview.
That's right.
And
That's
and if
right.
you're really interested in living a life you love living, then accept one of the offers we're going to make later this
Yeah.
month and work with her.
Thank you.
However,
Yes.
however, when I had that experience, anyone who has a larger experience of life wants more of that.
Right.
So I began to study, and I studied for a decade every way I could find to study transformation before I began to teach transformation. And in those days, in 1971, we did not have Barnes and Nobles and Borders bookstores with acres of self-help books. In fact, if I wanted to find a book on transformation, I would have to go in Portland, Oregon, where I was living. There was no internet. So either you went to a church that taught something about mental science,
Right.
or you went to an occult bookstore. And the first book I bought, which was called As a Man Thinketh by
Yes.
James Allen,
My
was
favorite.
inside. Well, yeah, but it was inside a shelf called Witchcraft.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because we had no idea. Our species in 1971 we had just the decade before learned that we could fire electrons, and we started to notice that electrons were influenced by the intention of the experimenter. This was not common knowledge. In 1971, we did not yet have a mind-body clinic at Harvard Medical Teaching Center. We did not know that our thoughts influence our immune system. we had no, as a general humanity, and today it's still, there's more populace that knows this, and certainly tons of books now that you can find.
Right.
However, books that really give you a very clear step-by-step through line like yours does,
Mm-hmm.
they're you have to, it's finding
Search.
diamonds in a pile of all kinds of things. So,
Yes. Yes.
but we're in a world today where it's easier to access. In fact, when I started my work, if you said you were a coach, the person would say,
Right.
"What sport?"
Yeah.
Because we didn't have coaching as an
No.
industry and as a career path. But today, the best part is that you have people who've spent, like you, years studying and can give a client or a person who works with you a shortcut, a leg up. You don't have to spend 30 years wandering in the desert
Right.
trying to find your way, because you can ride on the shoulders of all the study that's come before you.
That's exactly right. Yes. And As a Man Thinketh is one of the, it is my favorite book. I read that every day. So I read sections of it. It's fantastic. So yes, I think it's, but putting it in witchcraft, I know that, the type of thinking that it presents, I could see why people back in 71 thought that, and even people today, but it's not. It's just a wonderful way of
Everyone
presenting.
who's listening to you, everyone who's listening to your podcast today
Yes.
knows somebody who thinks it's woo-woo or hocus pocus that
Oh.
your thoughts have anything to do with your real life.
Yes. However, there are thoughts. They do
Yeah.
influence us.
We do, yeah, we can measure it now. I mean,
It's there.
yeah.
Yeah.
What happens is we have two sides to our brain. We have a right
Right.
side, of course, a left side. And the connective tissue between the two hemispheres of the brain is called the corpus callosum.
Right.
So, and our central nervous system and our subconscious mind knows no difference between something actual, physical, or something vividly imagined.
Mm-hmm.
So I could be, all of a sudden, the thought occurs to me, oh my God, something really bad could happen. This is too good to last. Something really bad could happen. I imagine that. My logical brain, my right and left begin to work together. There's a frequency to that thought that sends electricity through that corpus callosum into the fluid that surrounds the brain, goes up and down the spinal cord. That very vibration is signaled throughout the body and does not end with the body. It creates a magnetic field.
Right.
The electrons that are inside every atom, invisible to our five senses, but begin to organize according to that pattern. And the first creation of that thought, oh my God, something really bad could happen, is there's a reaction in the body that moves right through the nervous system. That frequency goes through every cell, every tissue, every organ. My immune system is immediately decreased in my ability to defend itself from bacteria and all kinds of things that my body is facing as my personal spacesuit.
Right.
But I immediately, what happens is the first creation, the thought, if I generate on that thought, meaning I vibrate with that thought, it sends the electrical signal up and down through my body, and I will notice the frequency I'm in through the feeling I'm having. Actually, what we call as humans, we call our noticing of the vibration we're in, we call that a feeling. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling scared.
True.
I'm feeling nervous. But those words are the description of the vibration that is the reflection of the thinking and the vibration that thinking generates. So when you train people to notice what's constrictive and notice what's expansive, and the more we generate our lives from constrictive thinking, the more prison-like our lives become.
Yes.
And the more we learn to generate and agree with and lean into and live a vision-driven life instead of a condition-driven life.
Taking responsibility for it, yes.
We move right into an upward spiral of becoming that's possible for every single one of us.
And I have told the listeners before, it's raising the vibration when you think in this, imagining, thinking in a more positive, thinking towards your goal, going for something, feeling good, than panicking. And if you stay, like Mary has said, if you stay in that fight or flight or that feeling of anxiousness, and that vibration will bring more of the same because you're on that vibration level. And so it's so important to change that. That's why the method she talked about, holding off the panic, it helps you think of possibilities. You start thinking, okay, what if? And before you know it, you're out of that panic mode. And you come up with solutions. It's so true, and it does work, 100%. Yeah, I know. I know. Mary, with all the work you've done, would you talk a little bit about um, some of the things you learned maybe from the Dalai Lama or from Nelson Mandela that you have found the most valuable thing, is something very valuable that would benefit your life, that benefited your life, or would benefit the listeners?
Yes. Um, when you're entertaining, because you get to, there's no limit to any one of us in what we choose to think,
True.
except habit. We have habits around how we think.
Right.
Much like if you go to a lake, there's a well-worn path to the lake.
Mm-hmm.
You can take the well-worn path, or you can decide to go down through a path that's never been made before. We tend to take the well-worn paths in our thinking. They're like grooves in a record. And so why it's important to study with Elena or listen to her podcast is it will help you carve some new paths in the way that you think. And the way you think has everything to do with the patterns that you're generating and what that will mean. So an example of that would be your television. When you turn on your television, it's going to show you the pictures that are the effect of the frequency that you're tuned to. And perhaps you're a person who, in general, watches CNN. So when you turn on the TV, what was there before is what's going to pop up, and you're going to see pictures of problems and difficulty and terror and CNN, constantly negative news. It's
It is.
you can count on it. And CNN is
Mm-hmm.
not doing it to humanity. We created CNN because we've been trained to look for what's missing and wrong as a protective part of our early reptilian brain.
Right.
So it takes awareness and using the frontal lobes of our brain and our species to be able to live a life where our true potential, our ability to live free and fulfilled and bring difference and have that show up in the areas of life where we're going to create results anyway. Because 12 months from now, if you just keep breathing, you will have results in health and relationships and what you're doing with your time and talent, call it your vocation or hobby, but what you're doing with your time and talent and your time and money freedom. And there's, as much as we could take a blood report from you a year from now and give you a reading, we can give you a reading in your relationship fulfillment and satisfaction. We can give you a reading in what you're doing with your time and talent and whether you're expanded or contracted.
Mm-hmm.
We can give you a reading, a perfect reading in your calendar and your checkbook,
Mm-hmm.
which are perfect diaries to the effect of the frequency you're living from. If I'm used to CNN, it's easy for me to sit there watching CNN and dream of discovery and dream of home and garden and dream of travel and dream of romance, all of which there are frequency matches for the experience of discovery, home and garden, romance, or travel. But the frequency of CNN will never produce my experience of those. It just stays in the land of imagination until I do the work of changing the set point on the tuner.
Yes.
It's easy to do with with an electronic handheld tuner that we
Yes.
use for our televisions. But it's the same technology that one must do with oneself when you change your mindset.
Right.
And you work with a mentor and you start to gain momentum in changing that mindset so that your life used to be this way and now it's this way.
Exactly.
So remind me now the question you asked.
Well, I was asking something that you had learned from or done with the Dalai Lama or Nelson.
Dalai Lama.
Yeah, okay.
I thought of that is I was on a CNN mindset. It's like, oh, I would love to meet the Dalai Lama, but I kept it in the land of imagination. From the moment I dreamed up, I would love to meet the Dalai Lama, and I want to ask this guy a question. I want to ask him a question. And I would just keep it out there until I began to understand the technology of moving from out there to in here. But the reason I wanted to talk to him in the 80s, in the late 80s, I had attended a lecture where there were 18 or 30,000 people attending this lecture. And I was up in the nosebleed seats, but I wanted to hear what he had to say. And I listened to him, and I had read a couple of his books by then. And what was striking to me was this was a man who, since 1949, had been exiled from his country and had and the abuse to the people. I mean, his culture, Tibetan culture, a 5,000-year culture, was systematically being decimated and
Yeah.
the temples destroyed, and those who evacuated found refuge in India, as His Holiness did, and he was the exiled leader of the Tibetan people. But in Tibet, if an individual who had a 5,000-year history actually said out loud the words Om Mani Padme Hum, which effectively would be, if you walk down the streets of the United States and you say, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God," if you're Jewish, or "Our Father who art in heaven," if you're Christian, or any other, you can't say those words out loud in Tibet. You and your family are put in prison for the rest of your life.
My
It's
God.
sedition to the Chinese government. And here this man, all that's going on, and there's not a feeling there's not a word, there's not a feeling of resentment, bitterness, revenge. There's none of that in the way he's speaking. And I'm thinking, if we were, as a group of people, going to cut somebody a little slack for having a bit of resentment, or wanting revenge for all the people that have been murdered and killed and tortured, I thought, how does he do that?
Right.
How does he work vigorously for the freedom of Tibet and keep himself so emotionally clean while he's doing that? How do you do that?
It's amazing.
I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I created in my mind an image of being able to ask him that question. It would be another decade before I understood the technology of taking that out of my imagination and moving that into the field. And one day I picked up the phone, and the Office of Tibet was calling me to invite me to a meeting in Dharamsala, India, to take an interview with His Holiness, because the group I represented, they were considering having that group facilitate 3 week-long meetings over the course of 7 years. And it would be many meetings with him to produce that. Michael Beckwith, others or amazing individuals as part of that facilitation group. But I took the meeting. Now, you cannot make the Office of Tibet. I'm not a famous person. I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I get a phone call from the Office of Tibet.
That's amazing.
Now, look backwards, as Steve Jobs said, you can connect the dots going backwards. You can't connect them going forwards. But I could see the dots connecting that. But they weren't conscious, if I do that, maybe then that will happen. I just kept holding the image and vibrating with the image and doing the other pieces of work I teach. So I get this phone call. I go there. I'm being interviewed. And I had all the way there, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to ask this question. So at some point over tea, we're having this interview, and my group would be selected, and we would have that opportunity to work with him. But I said to him, so may I ask a question? And he said, of course. And I said, I've heard you lecture, I've read your books. I cannot find one wavelength of bitterness or revenge seeking or in you. And with all the facts of what's gone on in Tibet, and the torture and the murders and the active destruction of 5,000-year-old culture, how do you do that? And I would invite our listener at this moment to think about an old grudge you might have, a hurt that's been there for a long time.
Yes.
And every time it surfaces, there's a temptation to rehearse it and nurse it and curse it, and if only they hadn't, or if only I had. Sometimes it's at ourselves, sometimes it's at someone else.
Yes.
So I'm asking this man, how do you do this? And he said to me, we all have friends. Friends, easy love, easy forgive. But we also have our sacred friends. Sacred friends, very, very difficult. He says, Chinese people don't do this. Chinese government do this. Chinese government, my sacred friend. If Chinese government had not done what Chinese government did and does, I would not have had to evolve my heart to be bigger than the pain they bring.
Oh.
That is a daily practice. He said it comes through our 5,000-year tradition. It is called bodhicitta, which simply means the active practice of generating compassion. And that compassion not only opens your heart, but it brings transcendence. Yeah. So it isn't that you don't see what's being done, and you don't have a moment of a wave of grief about what's being done, but you see it for what it is, and you know that you must be more than that to transform that. You cannot transform it at the level of frequency that it's occurring.
That's right.
In the same way Einstein said, that the significant problems you face cannot be solved at the level of thinking
Right.
that creates those problems.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so what it helped me with is to begin to recognize my own sacred friends in my life. So when I say my two, among all my degrees and among all my things that I've achieved in my life, my
Mm-hmm.
two favorite degrees are the two black belts I've earned, one in success and one in failure. Both are equally instructive if we
Yes.
harness the good out of all the learning opportunities we have, which include the individuals who served us by playing the role of the bad guy at
Right.
some moment in our life, or played the person who betrayed us. Every hero
Right.
story has an element of betrayal in it.
Right.
And sometimes we played the role of being the betrayer, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we played the role of being the betrayed. Nevertheless, those stories give rise to the opportunity to transcend and become
Yes.
more by means of them. And
That's
that's really
exactly.
what he taught me. Yeah.
Wow, that is a wonderful gift, you know? It really is. And yes.
Nelson Mandela, you asked Nelson Mandela. I also dreamed of asking him, because here were two individuals on our planet, a Nobel Prize, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so Nelson Mandela begins his work of protest against apartheid,
Right.
the keeping of the whites and the blacks apart, and doing what our country, the United States, did many,
Yes.
many years ago.
Yes.
Um, and he actively does this from a nonviolent point of view. At one point, there were 86 of his fellow comrades who were just shot down and murdered right in front of him, and
I
he
remember.
became an iron, angry, violent young man. And
Yeah.
ultimately, he and two others were imprisoned for life. That was the
Right.
sentence. So he goes off to prison, and there he doesn't know he's going to spend 27 years, but he does spend 27 years there.
Yeah.
So when I get to meet him, we were told ahead of time there were 7 of us who got to have a 2-hour meeting with him. So I go to Cape Town for this meeting, and by then I had worked with the Martin Luther King children and the Mahatma Gandhi grandchildren in creating a project that we took to the United Nations. And on the 50th anniversary of Gandhi's assassination and the 30th anniversary of a 64-day period there between the 50th and the 30th assassination dates. So the grandkids and the kids, and we put this program together called A Season for Nonviolence. So we were bringing the Gandhi King Award to Nelson Mandela, and we got this 2-hour meeting with him. So, and we each got a question to ask. So I asked him, I said, here you are, a man who gets sentenced to prison for life. You do 27 years of hard prison time working in rock quarries. We were told ahead of time, no flash photography. The retinas in his eyes are so damaged from the light off, shining back from the
Oh yeah, from the rocks. Yeah.
Quartz. They were quartz, filled with quartz. So that bright light in his eyes had damaged his retina. So no flash photography, which of course we all agreed to. And so in this meeting, so here you are, man, you get sentenced to 27 years. You get sentenced to life. You don't serve life. You come out after 27 years. And then you become president of the country who sentences you to life. Who on our planet does that? Who? I mean, you think billions of people. Who on our planet ever does that?
I know.
How did you do that?
Yeah. How
did you use your mind to move from being a guy who gets sentenced to life to becoming the president of the country that sentences you to life?
Amazing.
How did that work internally? And because that's what I have sought to unpack and put into simple forms over the whole 40 years I've been studying this.
Right.
There are people who have what we call extraordinary results, who don't contain more potential than you, me, and every person listening to this call.
Right.
Every one of us has access to infinite potential.
Mm-hmm.
But we tend to go to that potential like the ocean with a teaspoon.
Yes,
and
we do.
Drink a teaspoon a day.
Yes, we do.
Some take a bucket, and some take a bathtub, and some learn to really pull forth. And then we go, oh my God, look at them.
Yes.
They're the extraordinary ones when we all have the same potential.
We all have it. I know.
So I asked him, how did you do that? And he said, the young man who was sentenced to prison, that angry young man, he could never have become president of the country. He said, and that young man was very angry. That young man that was me was very angry for a while. And all I could think, the first 6 months, the first maybe year, I was in deep, dark depression. And all I could think was, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over.
Wow.
And one day, he said, like a drop of water on a parched land, the thought, what if it's not, occurred to me. And I had no evidence for how it's over was not true. I had no evidence that what if it's not could be true. But I knew in that moment that that thought, what if it's not, I felt better.
Yes.
The presence of that thought.
Sure.
And so I just started saying, what if it's not? What if it's not? And so then this is a much longer story, but let me shortcut it. It began, what he built was a ladder of thinking from it's over, what if it's not?
Right.
And there were a whole series of things. He gave me 7 steps, but one of them was finally, what if my being here is actually part of the ending of apartheid? And he said, once he could generate for a while on that frequency in the same way, what if this isn't bad? What if there's good hidden here? What would I do? And so that's when the idea of writing letters occurred to him, and writing letters to press around the world. And ultimately, the American press and other press, after years and years of writing letters, would pick it up. They would take it on. An economic embargo was issued against South Africa, and the rest is history.
Mm-hmm.
But he said he had, over the course of that time, as he began to think more liberating and more generative thoughts, he went, we're all in this prison. The guards have to be here too, because they have to guard keeping us in the prison. And he began to practice having compassion and loving for all of the people that were the community of his life at that period. And he said, as he began to do that, not saying a word differently, he said, you were beaten if you said looked in their eye or spoken to them. But over time, just the energy of his compassion, it began to be a breakdown in the gap between prisoner and guard. And I mean, it transformed him and ultimately transformed our world when we could see a regular human transform himself from this way of being to this way of being a shining, living example. This is possible for every single one of us.
Oh, I love that story. I just love it. I mean, I love that whole, and it does. It starts with just a drop of an idea that can change everything. It's a phenomenal story, and for everyone out there, it really truly is changing your thoughts. It's changing the way you're thinking, and just opening the door to all the possibilities that you can achieve, and building, starting to act just in little ways that build, and you can achieve anything your heart desires that you really want. You really can walk right out of that prison. And I have to say, it is a beautiful life out here. So, yeah, Mary, I thank you so very, very much. Excuse me, my throat just got dry. But I thank you so, so much, because the stories you have brought us, and just you being here, and the things you have accomplished in your life, and the lives that you have transformed, it's just phenomenal. It's just, and keep transforming and keep doing. I mean, you're very active and doing so much still. And it's an honor to have you here. Now, do you have an event coming up or anything that you would like to tell people about?
We pretty much have always an event coming up, and people can find out about that by going to marymorrissey.com, MORRISSEY.com. Just go to events and the calendar, and we do 3 public live events a year, one in January, one in June, one in October, and they're in different places in the country. As we close though, Elena, I just want to encourage your listeners to take advantage of a very, very generous gift that you have on the table. And I know this is a limited gift because it includes a gift of your time, and that's the most limited thing every one of us only gets 1 a day.
Yes.
So listener, if you know this or not, but Elena does amazing transformational work, and you have an opportunity that is a short era of time because of what's going on in her work, where you can actually have a one-on-one conversation with Elena as a complimentary gift.
Yes.
That session is a session to help you clarify what it is you would really love in your life, identify what's between you and living that life, and then strategize some simple but highly effective steps you can take that will immediately begin to transform what's been to what you would love. So I just want to encourage listeners to take advantage of this complimentary half hour while you still have some spaces where they can say yes to them.
Yes, and they are filling. They are filling. And I thank you so much. Yes, that's exactly what I want to do. I want to help people transform their lives. And so far I've had great success, and I want to keep doing that and keep bringing it. But I thank you again. I thank you for coming. Folks, she is a fantastic person. For all of you, if you are interested in looking into more of what I do, you can go to elenachapman.com, and please do take advantage of looking up on Mary's site and looking at what she does also. I feel so extremely blessed with the wonderful people I get to have on the show, and I feel very blessed for all of you listening, and I know you're getting value. So keep on listening. Thank you, Mary. And for all of you, that is all for today. Have an awesome, wonderful day. You can learn more about me by visiting elenachapman.com or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Thank you.